I just spent the last 31 days doing a drawing each day with certain rigid parameters. I was using the Inktober prompts, which I sort of wasn't that wild about. I was drawing only with black ink in a sketchbook, and I was live streaming every single one of the drawings that I did. Perhaps you've seen some of them. If not, there's a whole playlist of them. And I just finished the very last one, and I wanted to just take you through them and tell you about this experience, which was in a lot of ways really great. Quite a lot of work, and I learned quite a lot as I went through it. I did experiments. I did different kinds of approaches, and it was just interesting. So I'll tell you some stories about it as we go through, and let's jump in, shall we, as they say in YouTube videos. All right, so I used this one consistent sketchbook. It is one of my favorite kinds of sketchbooks. It is called the Venezia by Fabriano, and it is it's a well-made book. It is has paper that is basically mixed media paper, which means that you can use it for most, not super wet media. It's not exactly watercolor paper, but it's close enough. So here is my prompt list. Every day I checked off the ones that I did, and you can see the whole list of them there. And I guess I should make some kind of a title page. I'll get around to that eventually. So here's the first one, and the prompt was mustache. And it's interesting just to look back on this now because it was a month ago, and I was, I drew it from a piece of reference photography that I found, and it is, I had certain rules, like I tried to keep all of my hatching going in one direction, and it's not terribly imaginative, but I did some interesting things with textures here and there, and it is a mustache. There's no question about it. That's about the only idea that was in there. This is the next day. The assignment was weave. And so I decided to draw a woman with a weave. I was quickly told that this is not actually a weave. It's considered braiding. But anyway, I didn't know that, so I just drew it anyway. And her whole kind of look is all woven, her outfit and her hair and so forth. So she is weave. So again, I was using my imagination a little bit, but I have to say a lot of the time when I was working on these things, and this I'll show you in a minute, I started to get very self-conscious. This one is drawn really straight from my imagination. The prompt was crown, and I just had in my mind, I just imagined a crown that was kind of drawn like this with a brush, and then I drew this guy who is, just some dude. I don't know. He has a striped suit on, and that's about all I have to say about him. He is the crown. This next prompt was murky, and I really struggled with this one. It was murky. It felt murky, and I couldn't figure out what to do, so I just decided to do a portrait of a person and to make it kind of look murky. And from the get-go, I wasn't really pleased with it. I felt like I screwed up the eyes. It started to look to me like, I don't know, it just didn't look like anything I would normally draw. And this was part of the process that I was going through, where I was feeling self-conscious. I was feeling like I'm posting these things, and everybody else who's really good out there is also following the same prompt. And it's like a one-to-one comparison of how great they are at it and how lousy I am at it. I just struggled with it, and I just, this one made me really unhappy. I even did it a second time to see if I could make it any better. And I don't know, it was a little wild, but it felt like it was self-consciously wild. Again, this is just not me, but it's sort of interesting, I guess. Yeah. This is the next prompt, which was deer. And now I felt like I was kind of coming back to myself. I drew this deer, and he is, I don't know, he's writing an essay, and I like the idea of drawing these antlers in a kind of very flowing, organic way. And I drew this kind of tribute to my ancient taxidermy collection that I used to have. And I drew a couple of hunters that this deer had caught and stuffed. And so I started thinking, okay, like I'm getting into like cartooning, which is not something I've done for a long time, but it is certainly part of my personality and my approach to life. Is I love cartoons or graphic novels, and I like to do stuff that's funny. So this felt like, okay, this might be opening a door. So the next prompt was Pierce, and I decided to draw Pierce Brosnan. I have to tell you that this is Pierce Brosnan because it doesn't particularly look like him, but it is. This is actually an incredibly good drawing of Pierce Brosnan. You just don't recognize it as such. But anyway, he has piercings, and that was about it. That's Pierce as a pierced 007. All right, the next prompt was starfish. And this is the time where I was like, I am not drawing a starfish. I'm just not doing it. It seems too dull, too uninteresting. So I decided that I would draw a star who was a fish. And this star is Marlon Brando. Marlon, get it? Marlon? And he's a Marlon. And he is in The Codfather. Come on, laugh it up. That's hilarious. Anyway, I quite like the way that I did the paint. It's painting. It is a painting in the sense that it is all done with this Sumi ink, which is my favorite kind of ink to paint with, ink wash, and a brush pen. The next one was Reckless. Struggled with the idea for what this should be, and I decided I would make a guy who was as reckless as possible. He's driving. He's drinking. He's on the phone. He has a gun here next to him. He's covered with tattoos, including on his face. The face tattoos are kind of where I started. And then he has piercings and nose piercings, and he's smoking as well. So, yeah, so he's just generally reckless. Kind of cool as well, as reckless people can be. So, yeah. The next one was heavy was the prompt. And I decided to just draw lots and lots of things that are heavy. Heavy cream, a heavy coat, heavy artillery, heavily preggers, heavy metal, heavy weight, heavy bag, heavy traffic, heavy meal, heavy lift, just lots and lots of heavy stuff. So and we did this on Draw With Me, so it was fun to, I like this rain actually, heavy rain, where you can see the raindrops on the thing. And this is a heavy moment as they're burying somebody, so. The prompt was sweep, and I decided to draw a kind of classic Victorian era, Edwardian era chimney sweep. I think they used to wear top hats. I'm not sure why. They had this special kind of broom, and there he is on the rooftop, chimney pots, looking out over London, churches and stuff like that. Sort of classic scene. And this is, again, another turn for me because now I'm doing like a full up scene, which I'd kind of done a little bit with this one and with this one, but this is even more so like a full, like a painting scene kind of thing, not just a drawing of a thing. Sting was the next one, and we talked about, should we draw Sting from the Police? Should we draw a bee? I decided for some reason to draw a kind of, I don't know, what is it called? Robotic, I guess. Robotic bee who's also like fully weaponized. And it's kind of, I don't know, it's sort of cyberpunk, but it's also, what's it called when you're the sort of 19th century, I can't think of the word right now. But anyway, it sort of looks like a machine, and it's kind of partly analog and partly digital. And it's a bee. Shredded was the next brief. Originally, I was going to draw a box of shredded wheat, but then I thought that would be kind of fun for me, but I'm not sure how great that would be. So I decided instead to do Freddy Krueger from Nightmare on Elm Street. You can see his face is pretty shredded. And it was interesting to look at pictures of him because the makeup, the way they do the makeup is they were sort of revealing layers of his skin that have been burned and stuff. And it was kind of cool. And I also kind of worked on how to, that was a lot of the process that I would go through with these was how do I fit it into this basically 6x9 page and do a composition that feels kind of interesting and compose the whole page as opposed to just doing a drawing sitting in the middle of it. Drink was the next prompt, and I decided to invent an Inktober beer. So it has it says India Pale Ink, and there's an ink bottle logo that's kind of reproduced up there. And there's a bottle here with the kind of thing etched in. This is really more of an opportunity to do something a bit more complicated in terms of design, make something up, and also to do some nice painting with some ink. Not too deep. All right, so the prompt was trunk, and the people who were hanging out with me as we were drawing these on the live stream, we started talking about lots of different ways you can interpret trunk, and I decided to incorporate several of them in this one drawing. So we have an elephant with a trunk, which is kind of the first thing that people tended to think of, and then there's the trunk of the car, and then there's a stack of trunks, like steamer trunks, and then there's a trunk of a tree, and then there's a little tiny bird here who's making a trunk call, which is like an old-fashioned call. I'm not even sure what they were doing, what that means anymore, but anyway, a whole bunch of trunks, and he's driving through the landscape, and there was what was originally a tree, but we turned that into, somebody suggested it become an ostrich, so that's what that is. And I struggled a bit with getting this perspective in properly. And there's also a pair of trunks here, swimming trunks. They're hanging out of his suitcase. And of course, it says trunk on his license plate. So that's a bunch of trunks. All right, so this is ragged, was the prompt here, ragged. And so I decided to draw Raggedy Ann that I didn't really know that much about. I'd never had a Raggedy Ann doll. Didn't know much about it, so I did a bit of research, learned a bit about where they came from, what the story was behind it. I decided here to do kind of a stuff with textures. I was interested in drawing this fabric and her hair, because it's a very simple thing in a way, a little rag doll like this. And I tried to make it sort of dimensional and give it some grit. Not grit, but texture. Blunder. So I'm sometimes a clumsy person. I spill stuff. And so I did this drawing, and I did this on Draw With Me. So JJ was here with me when I did it. And I just was doing a self-portrait, and then at the end, I splattered ink on it as if I had blundered. And I kind of went overboard with this ink spot. I had it was smaller and more contained. And then I decided to make it bigger. And when I did another splash, it went all over my face here. And it was just kind of a mess. But it was still kind of fun. And that went through the paper. So I ended up having to skip this paper and came back and used it just as a test page for future drawings. Ornate was the next prompt. So this idea came to me pretty quickly. I wanted to draw a really ornate frame. And in the middle of it was a really simple drawing. So this was fun. I just kind of invented the most complicated kind of thing I could do, and then I gave it some shading, and there was that. Deal. We talked a lot about handshakes and stuff like that, but I had in my mind a card game, and I was thinking about those classic paintings of dogs playing cards, and so I decided to do that. And here is a bunch of people and a bunch of dogs, including a pug, and they are playing, and this dog, I guess, is dealing, and the rest of them are kind of sitting around drinking beer, and there's some paintings on the wall. And this is kind of fun. I'm not super happy with the way I drew the dogs. They look kind of like something I would have drawn in high school, but it's fun anyway. And it was fun to look at those paintings. Arctic. I struggled with this one a bit because I wasn't sure what I was drawing. I just decided, fine, I'll just draw some random Arctic animals. I didn't really have a composition in mind, so I drew this puffin, and then I started wedging in other things. And then when I drew the caribou, I hadn't left room for his antlers, so I kind of wrapped them around the bear. And then I stuffed this walrus back here. And and then somebody suggested I draw a frame on it, so I did, and that kind of pulled it together, but I wasn't terribly happy with this. But in retrospect, it doesn't look that bad, so I'm not sure what I was complaining about. Here the prompt was rivals, so I decided to draw my two dogs. This is Twiglet, this is Clover, and to just draw them as rivals. And this is a classic thing where Twiglet will be sitting, and Clover will come and just kind of like wedge her way way in there and kind of like, they're always competing, not just for food, but for space and for everything, constantly fighting and competing. It's an endless struggle for survival of the puggist. All right, blast was the next one. I just didn't want to draw a blast. I didn't want to draw flames and smoke. I don't know, I just didn't want to do it. So I drew this blaster from Star Wars, and, you know, it was kind of fun to draw. It was interesting. It was interesting to think about this as a prop, actually. And there's Han Solo in a couple of classic poses that he did, you know, with the blaster. And the blaster itself is kind of a strange thing. It looks like it's a very old, it's not an old tech looking thing. It's not a modern digital thing. But then, of course, Star Wars takes place a long, long time ago in a galaxy far away. So this next one was Button, and I decided that I am not going to draw a button. So instead I decided to draw Benjamin Button from the F. Scott Fitzgerald story, and then also from the movie that, that was made a few years ago with Brad Pitt. And it's a story of a man who is born old and then progressively gets younger. So he's a very, very old baby, and then he's like a kind of pretty old 10-year-old, and then sort of like a middle-aged teenager. And then here he's kind of like at the sweet spot where he's both looks old, looks sort of 40-ish, 30, 40, and he is that, and he has a little kid there. And here he is, he's like a 10-year-old, but now he's 60 and he's retired. And here he's an old man, but he looks like a baby. It was kind of fun to make those guys up. So I did. All right, this next one was Firefly. I didn't know what to do with fireflies. I was going to do a whole page of studying, from a naturalist's notebook about fireflies. And I decided instead to do this, where I was thinking about people being illuminated by their cell phones. A lot of people looked at this drawing and said, was this like a memorial for somebody? But no, it was just kind of college kids or something walking through the park, all looking at their phones. And then around them are fireflies and the moon and stars. And they're sort of oblivious to it. And the whole scene is, I enjoyed doing this. It was fun. It was fun to figure out how to do the light so that it got progressively darker and they were lit. And it was a nice, I'm not sure that it's that successful as a piece of illustration, but it was a fun thing to draw. This is Rowdy was the prompt here. And I was walking my dogs the morning before I drew this, and there were a bunch of crows up on the phone lines, and they were being really rowdy. And so I thought, okay, that's what I'm just going to do. Some kind of, almost like something from Dumbo or something, like just squawking crows. And to draw them, I wanted to draw them in a really scritchy, scratchy way. I wish I'd made them look a little bit more crow-like in their bodies. They look kind of strange, like a children's story or something, but it's okay. And then there's a bunch of other birds that are just kind of sitting there and listening to them. And I was quite happy with how I did the background here. I did that first. I painted in. It was quite disciplined of me to do some clouds in the background. Inferno was the next prompt, and here I decided to draw a bottle of hot sauce. I went through and looked at a bunch of like super hot sauces. For some reason, I landed on this one, all natural zombie apocalypse sauce. I don't know. It doesn't really say hot sauce. It's kind of a weird drawing, but it is what it is. I had fun drawing those zombies. All right, puzzling. This was the one that I struggled with for a long time, and I finally had this idea of me seeing myself as a puzzle. And so I drew this thing of like me looking in the bathroom mirror is an incomplete puzzle, and I'm sort of mystified by myself. But it was really hard to get this drawing done, particularly in ink, without a pencil sketch and stuff. And it was just a struggle to get it right. And I think, again, these drawings are just not great, but the idea is kind of funny. So it is what it is. Onion was the next one. And at this point, I was exhausted from all these highly conceptual things that I had done. So I just said, damn it, I'm getting a couple onions from the kitchen. I'm putting them on my table, and I'm going to do a drawing of them. And that's basically what I did. So this is pretty different. The next one was skeletal. And I decided to do a tribute to Posada, the great Mexican woodcut artist, and to just do one of his drawings in ink. And it's pretty much the way he did it, but it was just fun to really get into the details of it and to figure out how to kind of do the different sorts of lines. And yeah, that was fun. It was just a line thing, no ink wash. Lesson was the next one, and I had this idea of doing a driving lesson, and then I decided it should be a dad and a teenage girl, and she's kind of driving like a maniac, and he's freaking out, and that's kind of all there is to it. It was fun, again, to figure out the different levels of light, because I knew I wanted to have their eyes be lit, and then I also wanted to think about how lighting happens inside of a car. So you kind of like, there's light coming in from the windows, but then there's also shadow, and just figure all that out. I kind of screwed up his expression. It wasn't quite the way I wanted it to be, but it's okay. I mean, I think it feels like a three-dimensional space and an overall thing, so it's okay. I like it. Zombies. So the prompt was vacant. So this is the second time I'm drawing zombies. I also drew cars several times. I drew guns several times. They're definitely motifs. So here it's basically they're looking vacant, and they're in a city that's kind of vacant. And I drew this without any lines. It was entirely drawn with a brush. And at one point in the middle of doing this, JJ said they don't really look like zombies. And somebody, in fact, said they look like their flight's just been canceled, which I thought was hilarious. So I worked to make them look more zombie-like. Part of that was by putting some more stains on it, putting this brains thing down here, and then I figured out how to put these little white teeth in it, and that made all the difference. So this is one of my favorites that I did. And yeah. And then this is the final one that I just did today. Award was the prompt. And I thought about all of the awards that are given to creative people. There's just so many awards. The Emmy, the Oscar, the Tony, the Grammy, all those things. And why is it that art, which is normally a non-competitive activity, has been turned into a competition by all these award shows? Basically so that they can broadcast the awards and make money from the advertising that they put on it. But it just reduces something that creativity, which I don't think is a competitive thing. It's not a sport, and it makes it into a sport by having people get nominated, get competing against each other. And instead of supporting artists to do the things that they're supposed to do, should do, and can do, and giving money to in grants and all kinds of other things, I guess grants are sort of competitive too, but they're different. A lot of these don't even have money it's attached to them, and they're just like a way for people who aren't in that competitive field to make money from them. So it kind of bugged me. And that's it. That is the whole sequence of things that I did. And it was a lot of fun to do. If you've never done something like this, I recommend it. You don't have to wait till October to do it. Just get a bunch of prompts. We often have them here, or come to draw with me on Thursdays and draw with us. It's just fun to have a project, to say, like, I'm going to do this every day. I learned a lot from this. I certainly improved my ink wash painting. I thought more about doing things as illustrations, which I'm not an illustrator. I don't really think in terms of having a whole story, like that trunk thing with all the different elements or the zombies, just figuring out how to tell a whole story. I definitely learned stuff from it. I'm going to continue digesting it and thinking about it. But it was just, I'm also, a sense of accomplishment from having done it every single day for 31 days and doing it as a live stream as well. So, build discipline for yourself that way. You improve your skills, you take risks, you do experiments, and you have a lot of fun. So whether you wait till next October to do it, or if you just give yourself an assignment right now, I strongly urge this as a way of doing it. And it doesn't have to be every day. It could be every Tuesday. However it is you want to do it, doing it in a consecutive way and looking at the overall project as your objective, as opposed to, is this one drawing I did any good? You look at the whole bunch and you go, yeah, that was fun. That was interesting. I learned some stuff. So thanks for sharing this with me. And I will see you again very soon. Bye-bye.